Today, I brought you the story of the movie Logan Lucky, which is about a daring heist carried out right in front of everyone in a massive car race stadium packed with people and security guards. In this story, a group of thieves steals millions from the stadium's locker right under everyone's noses. So let's not waste any more time and dive into the story. And as always, while the intro is playing, feel free to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. At the very beginning of the story, we see a man named Jimmy Logan, who's chatting with his daughter Sadie. We learn that Jimmy's phone service has been cut off because he hasn't paid the bill in a long time. Logan's daughter was about to participate in a singing competition. Now, we see Jimmy working in an underground construction site in a stadium. When his boss calls him, Jimmy limps over to meet him. There, his boss fires him from his job because Jimmy hadn't mentioned his broken leg before joining. Actually, even though Jimmy walks with a limp, his leg is pretty much fine. But at their company, only people who are 100% healthy are allowed to work. Jimmy's financial situation was already bad, and losing his job felt like the sky was falling on him. Once upon a time, Jimmy was a top-level basketball player, but an accident during a game broke his leg. Anyway, now Jimmy goes to see his sister Millie, who tells him that his daughter is upset with him for not attending her singing event the previous day. So Jimmy goes straight to see his ex-wife Bobby, who had divorced him a long time ago. Bobby was about to leave town with her new husband Moody for business in another city. Hearing this, Jimmy gets really angry because it means he won't be able to see his daughter easily anymore. Since Bobby had full custody, she could take their daughter away from the city. And there was nothing Jimmy could do about it because he wasn't financially capable of taking responsibility for his daughter. From there, Jimmy heads to a bar where his brother Clyde works as a bartender. But the Logan family seemed to be living proof of bad luck. Jimmy, who was on his way to becoming a great basketball player, lost his career after breaking his leg. His brother Clyde was in the army, but after a mission in Iran, he lost his hand and was discharged. Luckily, nothing like that had happened to their sister yet. Just then, a few guys come in and start making fun of Clyde for not having a hand. Unable to tolerate his brother's humiliation, Jimmy gets into a fight with them. Meanwhile, Clyde takes a bottle of alcohol and sets those guys' car on fire outside. When the guys come out and start recording the burning car as evidence, Jimmy throws their phones into the flaming car. Anyway, the next morning, Jimmy and his brother start planning a heist because both of them are in dire financial straits. They plan to rob the massive Charlotte Motor Speedway stadium, where Jimmy used to work. While working there, Jimmy discovered an underground pipeline through which all the money from the stadium's shops and bets is sent directly to a vault. But the vault is highly secure. Plus, the stadium has a private security agency overseeing everything. So, to break into the vault, they need a specialist. The two brothers go to prison to meet a guy named Joe Bang. They discuss the plan with Joe, who knows the vault sensors are extremely tough, but Jimmy tells him that, due to ongoing construction, the electric sensors are currently turned off. So Joe only needs to open the vault. Hearing this, Joe agrees, but he still has 6 months left on his sentence, while the heist needs to happen within 5 weeks. So Jimmy tells Joe about a plan to break him out of jail. The idea is to sneak Joe out at noon, do the job, and return him to prison by evening. Impressed by their plan, Joe agrees. Now, they need 2 more people for the job, Joe's own brothers. Jimmy and his brother discuss the plan with Fish and Dayton, Joe's brothers, who agree to join. Then, Joe meets with his brothers and tells them to collect a bag from someone. Meanwhile, Clyde intentionally crashes his car into a shop. As a result, when Clyde is brought to court, the judge, considering him a former army officer, sentences him to only 3 months in jail. Meanwhile, every day a maintenance vehicle would go in and out of the prison, and Jimmy's sister Millie would follow it and jot down some data in her notebook. By now, Millie had also become involved in their plan. On the other hand, Clyde was placed in the same prison as Joe. Both Clyde and Joe analyzed the data Millie provided and started making something. Meanwhile, Jimmy goes to see his daughter and takes her to meet a friend. There, Jimmy talks to his friend about a truck, then takes his daughter back to his sister Millie. There, Jimmy runs into a junior from college named Sylvia. She was a social worker and a doctor. She had set up her clinic in a car and, using donations from various people, would drive around providing medical care to to the poor and needy. She even gives Jimmy a vaccine to protect him from infection. They have a long conversation that day, and Jimmy starts to like Sylvia. That night, when Millie asks Jimmy about their backup plan, Jimmy tells her to just focus on her own job. Millie, meanwhile, starts marking different cockroaches with various symbols. Fish and Dayton begin buying various supplies for their tasks. Everyone is extremely busy with their own roles. At that point, Jimmy goes back to the stadium to collect some of his things. On his way out, he steals a blueprint of the stadium, but just then, he runs into his boss. However, his boss, being a good-hearted person, apologizes to Jimmy for firing him and tells him that the construction work will be finished soon as they completed it ahead of schedule. Hearing this, Jimmy gets very stressed. He calls his brother and says that the job they plan to do in 5 weeks now has to be done in just 3 weeks. But the day Jimmy had planned the heist falls on the biggest car racing event in the city at the stadium. That means there would be a lot more people, a lot more money, and a much higher security risk. At first, Jimmy's sister suggests canceling the plan, but Jimmy assures her that none of this will actually matter for their job. Later, a female employee working inside the stadium's locker receives a birthday cake from Jimmy's crew. She celebrates her birthday with her co-workers, but then the stadium security officers call her outside because someone had hit her car. She files a complaint following all the rules. By the time she returns to the locker, it's already 5:30. The locker door automatically locks at 5:30, so the cake is left inside. That night, Fish and Dayton go to the construction area and release the cockroaches marked by Millie into the various money transfer pipe. Meanwhile, Joe makes a deal with another inmate in prison. The next day, when the woman returns to work, she finds a cockroach in the cake she left in the shop the previous day. When they call people to clean the locker, Fish and Dayton show up. After cleaning, they call Jimmy and tell him the color of the cockroaches. Jimmy uses the cockroaches to figure out which pipe is closest to the locker. Anyway, the day of the heist arrives, the day of the city's biggest car race. In the morning, all the prison cells are open. By now, Clyde has gotten a job at the prison clinic. According to the plan, Joe starts eating and drinking a lot that day. Meanwhile, Jimmy's daughter is taken by Bobby and her husband to Millie's parlor to get Sadie ready for an event. But after they arrive, Millie cleverly slips out of the parlor, not taking her own car, but heading toward Bobby's husband Moody's car instead. Back in the prison, during the warden's inspection, Joe vomits in front of the warden from overeating. Joe is quickly admitted to the prison hospital, where Clyde already works. Now, Clyde takes Joe to the bathroom. Inside, they open a secret door and go through it to the prison workshop. By then, the maintenance vehicle had also arrived. Quietly, they attach the wooden box they made to the bottom of the vehicle. After finishing its work, the vehicle leaves the prison. Even though the police check the vehicle as it leaves, they find nothing, so it safely exits the prison. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Joe's inmate friends see on TV that only 2.5 hours remain before the race starts. As planned, Joe's inmate friends start a fight inside the prison. Seeing the situation escalate, the prison sounds the emergency siren, and the warden declares a full lockdown. As a result, everyone in the prison is trapped in their places. Meanwhile, Fish and Dayton blow up a server system far from the city. As a direct result of the sudden power outage, all the various shops located inside the massive stadium immediately lose access to their online transactions and even their standard card payments. Break time equals 0.5s / so now, out of necessity, all the frustrated customers have to pay for their items with physical cash. Break time equals 0.5s / meanwhile, when the transport vehicle that recently left the prison stops briefly at a local gas station, Joe and Clyde carefully crawl out from underneath the chassis. Break time equals 0.5s / Millie is already there at the station waiting for them with Moody's car. Break time equals 0.5s / the three of them then head quickly toward the stadium. Break time equals 0.5s / on the other hand, Jimmy has also arrived at the stadium on his own. Break time equals 0.5s he goes directly to the restricted underground area. And since he used to work there in the past, he still knows the secret password to the protected door and successfully gets inside. For the very first time, we see exactly how the money from the shops is sent to the central locker. Break time equals 0.5s / each shop puts its collected cash into a specialized jar, presses a manual switch on the pneumatic pipe, and the jar with the money is set flying straight to the locker. Break time equals 0.5s / after depositing the money, the empty jars return back to the shops. Break time equals 0.5s / anyway. By this time, Joe, Millie, and Clyde have also arrived at the stadium. Break time equals 0.5s / meanwhile, the inmates inside the prison take a few unsuspecting guards hostage and keep calling the warden in various ways just to waste his precious time. Back at the stadium, Joe and Clyde use the narrow trash chute pipes to reach the underground pipeline area, where Jimmy is already waiting patiently for them. Break time equals 0.5s / Joe cuts the pipe closest to the locker and makes a small, makeshift explosive device, which he puts inside a jar and sends toward the shop. Break time equals 0.5s / but the jar explodes midway through the pipe, and the thick smoke travels through the pipeline into the shop. Break time equals 0.5s / seeing this, the shopkeepers immediately alert the guard, and a few guards head down to the basement to check things out. Meanwhile, the inmates in the prison start sealing off all the CCTV footage and even the doors and windows that were monitoring them, so the warden can no longer track their movements. Break time equals 0.5s / two guards arrive in the basement to check things out. Break time equals 0.5s / Jimmy and his crew use a machine to pull the money out of the locker and fill it into large trash bags. Break time equals 0.5s / to speed things up. Jimmy increases the vacuum power of the machine, but it goes out of control and even sucks in Clyde's prosthetic hand. Break time equals 0.5s / they argue about it for a moment, but quickly get back to work. At the same time, an intense car race is happening in the stadium above. Break time equals 0.5s / in this way, they manage to get about half the money from the locker and send Fish and Dayton out with the trash bags full of cash. Break time equals 0.5s / as they head out, they run into the two guards who came to check the basement. Break time equals 0.5s / the guards question them but let them go since the bags look like trash and both are wearing staff uniforms. Break time equals 0.5s / but just before Fish and Dayton can leave, the exit gate locks shut and they can't get out. Meanwhile, as Jimmy, Joe, and the others are still inside, Jimmy sends Joe to find out why Fish and Dayton are taking so long to return. Break time equals 0.5s / Joe discovers that the exit door is locked and tries hard to open it, but he can't. Break time equals 0.5s / after a while, since Joe hasn't returned, Jimmy goes out to look for everyone. Break time equals 0.5s / on his way, he runs into the two guards again, who ask him about the smoke. Break time equals 0.5s / Jimmy tells them he doesn't know anything about it, so they let him go. Break time equals 0.5s / Jimmy finally finds everyone and sees that the door is chained shut. Break time equals 0.5s / he cleverly unlocks it, and Fish and Dayton are able to leave with the money. Now, Joe and Jimmy return to the basement to get the rest of the money. Break time equals 0.5s / by this time, they've managed to pull out the remaining cash from the locker. Break time equals 0.5s / Joe and Clyde then leave the basement, but on the way, they run into the man they fought with in the bar at the beginning of the movie. Break time equals 0.5s / the man mocks Clyde about his hand again, so Joe and Clyde beat him up and leave with Millie in her car. Break time equals 0.5s / a little later, Jimmy also leaves the basement with all the money in his truck. Meanwhile, in the prison, Joe's friends set a fire in a trash bin to trigger the fire alarm. Break time equals 0.5s / as soon as the alarm goes off, the guards call the fire department with the warden's permission. Meanwhile, at the fire station, Joe and Clyde were already dressed in firefighter uniforms and ready. They sneak onto the fire truck and make their way to the prison. When the firefighters enter the room, they see that the fire in the trash bin was set intentionally. On the other hand, Millie arrives at her parlor right on time and gets Sadie ready for the event. Jimmy also comes to the event to hear his daughter Sadie sing. In the prison clinic, when a nurse comes to check on Joe, he tells her that he got stuck in the bathroom because of the lockdown. Anyway, Jimmy attends his daughter's event and sees her win first prize. Afterward, as everyone heads home, Moody sees the dirty state of his car and starts yelling in anger. But Jimmy goes to a gas station and leaves all the stolen money there before leaving. While everyone else relaxes at home, Jimmy stays up late burning all the documents related to their plan. The next morning, the news breaks. A group of thieves robbed Charlotte Speedway, but they left all the money by the side of the road. Everyone is shocked. If the thieves didn't take the money, then why did they steal it in the first place? Meanwhile, the complex case was now handed over to two special FBI agents. Their first step was to meet with Jimmy's boss in person. They told Jimmy's boss to collect fingerprints from all of his workers. While the boss agreed to provide the fingerprints, the company policy actually required all workers to wear gloves for safety, so the fingerprints would be useless. Just then, another agent came in and informed them that he had found an eyewitness who had seen the thieves with his own eyes and even knew them from before. The agents then went to see the man whom Joe and Clyde had badly beaten after the robbery. The man told the agents everything he knew about Clyde, but since Clyde was in prison at the time, the agents didn't really suspect him. Plus, someone had recorded a video of this man arguing with another race car driver, so the agents thought maybe this man had gotten into a fight with the driver and was making false accusations against Clyde out of spite. Anyway, the story now jumps ahead 3 months. By then, Clyde's sentence was finally over. When he returned to his sister's house, he found a parcel waiting for him on the table. Meanwhile, the agents went to the prison to investigate the robbery case. They had some CCTV footage of Joe meeting with Clyde and Jimmy. They suspected that both Joe and Clyde had escaped from prison, committed the robbery, and then somehow returned to prison. So they asked the prison warden if anything unusual had happened in the prison on the day of the robbery. But since the warden hadn't reported the fight that happened that day to his superiors, he could have lost his job for negligence. To save his job, he told the agents that nothing unusual had happened. He even boasted about the prison security, claiming that escaping from there was absolutely impossible. The agents returned to their office and continued investigating Jimmy. But Jimmy had been fired from his job 4 months before the robbery. On top of that, his phone service had been disconnected due to unpaid bills, and he drove an old car with no GPS. So it was impossible for the agents to track Jimmy's location during the robbery. Plus, Jimmy had been present at his daughter's concert and many people had testified to that, so the agents had no evidence against Jimmy. Now the story jumps another 3 months ahead, when Joe's prison sentence also ended and he was released. The agents then went to meet the CEO of the Charlotte company. After 6 months with no progress in the case, the CEO told the agents to leave. Before leaving, the agents asked if the CEO had received the insurance money. The CEO said yes, but when the agents asked how much, he didn't give a clear answer, since the money on the locker hadn't even been counted yet, so no one really knew how much money was in the locker. Without giving a straight answer, the CEO left. Now we see Joe doing some odd jobs around his house. Suddenly, someone knocks on his door. When Joe goes outside, he doesn't see anyone, but he does find a shovel left there for digging. Seeing this, Joe angrily curses and goes back inside, but then he notices a mark and starts digging at a spot. After digging for a while, he finds a bag full of money. Joe is overjoyed. Now we realize that Jimmy's entire plan was working. He never told Joe, Fish, or Dayton about this. In fact, he himself had deliberately broken Fish and Dayton's exit gate. He intentionally sent Joe to go see his brothers because that gave Millie the chance to come in. During that time, the 3 siblings filled another bag with a lot of money. After stuffing enough cash into the trash bags, Jimmy sent his sister back out. Then he threw the trash bags full of money into a dumpster, wiped everyone's fingerprints off, and left to go find Joe and the others and open the exit door for them. The next day, one of Jimmy's friends, whom he had talked to about a truck, came and loaded the stadium's trash into his truck and hid the bag full of money in a secret place. Now, about 6 months later, when things had calmed down, Jimmy retrieved the money from that spot. Meanwhile, the guy who had started the fight in prison at Joe's request was released. When he got into his car, he found an envelope full of cash waiting for him. Jimmy also sent a lot of money to his college junior, the social worker Sylvia, and the woman who had been sent a cake and whose car had been bumped, Jimmy sent her a lot of money too. Everyone was thrilled to get their share of the cash. Jimmy too went out for a fun day with his daughter. And finally, when Jimmy went to see his brother Clyde asked him, "How did you know that if you waited 6 months to take out the money, there wouldn't be any trouble?" Jimmy tells him that he actually left the money at the gas station on purpose so that the agents wouldn't look for it, because no matter how hard the agents searched for the thieves, without any evidence, they would never be able to catch them. So Jimmy wanted the agents to look for them, not the money. Since no one knew exactly how much money was in the locker, everyone assumed the money left at the gas station was the full amount. Also, the reason for waiting 6 months to take out the money was that the agents would only keep chasing them for a maximum of 6 months. After that, with no evidence, they would close the case. So now everything had ended safely. Just then, Sylvia showed up, with whom Jimmy had started a relationship. Meanwhile, on the other side of the house, Joe had started flirting with Millie. Only poor Clyde was sitting alone. At that moment, a woman started talking to Clyde very nicely, but this woman was none other than the FBI agent. In other words, the FBI still hadn't given up on them. And with that, today's story comes to an end. Hopefully, the second part of the story will come soon. However, there were quite a few plot holes in this story. For example, Joe was told he only had to open the locker, but they never actually reached the locker. Also, what was the point of Joe deliberately causing an explosion inside the pipe? What's the point of inviting trouble on purpose? What actually happened because of that explosion? Nothing happened at all. Also, since the whole heist only took a few hours, they could have pulled it off any day before or after the race if they wanted. So what was the need to take such a big risk? Because it's not like they were that greedy for money. Plus, the cash was being sent through the locker without even being counted. So think about it. Since everything was being done in cash, if someone bought something for 50 bucks and gave them 100, how are they giving the change back? Since they were sending the money straight to the locker as soon as they got it. So honestly, these things are kind of plot holes in the story. Anyway, besides that, I also found Joe's two brothers pretty useless. I mean, what did they actually do in the story? I feel like even if they weren't there, the heist would have gone just fine. Still, putting all these plot holes aside, let me know in the comments how you felt about the story. That's it for today. Goodbye for now.